It's Wednesday, the 18th day of August 2021, a day after the president cut sword for the construction of 101 district hospitals and 10 additional hospitals. 6 regional hospitals, an additional, a new regional hospital for the Western region, and 6 regional hospitals for the newly created regions, as well as 2 specialized facilities in the middle and northern belt of the country and an infectious disease center. So all adding up to 111. Well, many of you have asked questions. You've been talking about it. Is led conversations the whole of today. The government has been answering your questions, but you've asked very critical questions. You've asked, where are we going to get the money from? That's supposed to cost us some $1.7 billion. What provisions are made for 1.7 billion? In effect, some 10 billion Ghana cedis in the 2021 budget. Well, it's supposed to be completed in 18 months, so all things being equal, it gets into 2021, 2023, and you'd say, well, maybe the 2022 budget would take care of it. But you've also raised concerns, for instance, about the seed money, $100 million. You've said you've given less than 10%. So how do you intend to construct these? More like making available $1 million for each district hospital. That, you say, is inadequate. And you've asked the question, can we trust the president? After all, he cut sword for the construction of La General Hospital in August 2020. And like our people would say, we're here, still waiting for the La General Hospital. You've asked questions about the Shama District Hospital. You've asked questions about the Eastern Regional Hospital. But the government says we are committed to the construction of 101 district hospitals, 111 hospitals in total. You raised questions about whether or not you even need this project centralized with a team led by the Chief of Staff, Madam Akosua Frema Opare. Well, that's not what we're discussing today, because this morning there was a demonstration. Yes, a demonstration about public sector wages. The fact that 4% increase is not the way to go. The workers, as you're about to see, have said they don't even have a daily bread. Not a daily one. In fact, it's like a quarter bread. Well, this evening we're asking critical questions. This group who are demonstrating say they are demonstrating against the Trades Union Congress because they feel the Trades Union Congress has not represented their feelings. So far as they're concerned, the Trades Union Congress could have done better with the sort of negotiations they did. This evening, we're asking that critical question. Did the Trades Union Congress let public sector workers down? Or maybe they took into consideration COVID-19. COVID-19 has affected the Ghanaian economy, in fact, affected the global economy. So in COVID times, would it be appropriate for workers to be demanding huge pay rise? Or maybe, because of the effects of COVID-19, workers say, how about you help us deal with COVID-19? After all, during the lockdown, you helped others. My name is Winston Amoah, and tonight on Upfront, we get answers to these and many more questions. But first, let's see how these workers hit the streets of Accra, demonstrating and registering their concerns against public sector wage increase.
We are currently at the road in between the Trade Union Congress and also the Accra Technical University, where some public sector workers are demonstrating or protesting against the 4% salary increase. Now, they have a number of placards with various inscriptions like labor union leaders are disappointment and a sellout. Again, stop the deductions on our pay slips until until you address our problems. Again, some of the placards says we cannot survive with 4% 2021 and 7% 2022. So these are the concerns of some of these public sector workers who are demonstrating today. Let me get a quick reaction from the leader of the group here. Sir, thank you very much for your time this morning. What do you seek to achieve with this protest?
We only want to tell the politician that the country does not belong to they alone, and that public sector workers also deserve a bit of the cake, and that 4% is nothing to write home about. So we just want at the end of the protest to hear from government that they have changed their decision, they are going back to the negotiation table, and they are giving us nothing less than 25%.
It appears that some of the members of the demonstration do not want to speak to the media, but essentially all they are asking government to do is to increase the 4% to somewhere about 10%. That is what they want. They've raised concerns about COVID-19 and its impact on their finances. They have family members, they have wives, they have children, they have to take care of, they have to pay school fees. And that is why they are protesting against government to quickly increase the 4% to 10%. So this is the current situation. Right now, we are currently in front of the Controller and Accountant General's department. That is where we are at the moment, the Ghana Publishing Company. And just behind me are the presence of the security officers, I mean the police personnel. They are here in their numbers to ensure that this exercise is smooth and that they do not have any challenges, and also comply with the agreed routes that have been agreed between the leadership of the group and also the police service as well.
Yes, as a public house worker, I'm not satisfied with the 4% increment. The 4% increment, I'm not happy with it. That is why I'm also participating in the demonstration.
I see, but what makes you think that this demonstration will yield the result?
Yes, we are in a democratic country, okay? And then I'm just positive that the president will listen to us and then listen to our plea as we are sending the petition. We are hopeful that he should listen and then address our concerns.
But which specific sector do you work with?
I'm in the health sector.
You're in the health sector, and you didn't go to work today. I mean, I'm sure your patients work.
No, I'm for afternoon. We run shift.
Yeah, you have to afternoon.
Afternoon shift, yes. And then I can't sit down unconcerned and go to work hungry or unhappy. You get it? When you go to work and you are not happy, who suffers? Isn't it the patient? You understand? So if we all sit down and look, trust me, people are not happy. Okay? But because we are in the public sector, people decide to sit back and complain. Now at the end of the day, who suffers? Isn't it the patient? You get it? So if some few of us sacrifice our time to submit this petition, it's also an appeal that our nursing leaders should also listen to us and know that the 4% from 10% reduced to 4%. It's a no.
So what do you want?
If they can increase it to 20%, 25%, we don't mind. Because the ministers are taking 17 and 25. They should give us the balance.
So anything below 10, you reject it?
Whatever our leaders are going to negotiate for us, it shouldn't be below 10. You understand? We are not in normal times.
Right.
With this era of COVID, last year, we had this tax exemption and everybody was excited about it. You understand? But are we saying COVID is over? No, there's no tax exemption. Okay? We are taking our regular salary and you reduce it further. How? Meanwhile, we are also exposed to the COVID. So if we get the COVID and we are not able to get money to manage ourselves, what do? You get it?
Right.
So we are out today to appeal, to submit our petition. I'm hoping that our President, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa will listen to us, call our leaders back to the negotiation table, and then review it again. Even if he gives us 12%, it's more than the 10%. At the time, 4% is insignificant to us.
Tell us the motivation for this demonstration, sir.
I am motivated to participate in this demonstration because this demonstration is about my life. This demonstration is about livelihood and the source of my income. And for that matter, it is life itself for me. I am saying that this nonsense of 4% must stop today. It has ended and doesn't make sense. They should go and tell this to the Marines. That is why I am here. Look, most of the appointees of the president, many, if not to say most, let me use the old currency. Some take home 2 billion, 2.5, 1.5 billion OCD. Go to Aggrieved, go to those big companies, and you see how much government appointees take. And we those who oil the wheel of government, the public sector workers, some take home pittances as little as 400, 600, 800 Ghana, 1,000, 1.2 million, whatever. Meanwhile, we pay school fees. We buy fuel. Those who do have vehicles, they bought trucks and taxis every day. Those of us who do not live in our own homes, okay, we pay rent. We buy electricity. We buy water. Most of these big men don't buy water. They don't buy electricity. They don't buy fuel. In fact, our 2% that TUC leadership deducts every month is what they use to drive V8s. That is what they use to live in mansions. That is what they pay themselves as fat salaries. And yet, they have the guts to go and bring home 4%. I see it as a Kokwanansi story. They intentionally sat quietly with government appointees, with the political elites to give us 4%. Meanwhile, the political elites today are paying themselves 70+%.
But we are told that
What
the
nonsense
4%
is
was
that?
an agreement. Government would have to recruit or employ over 1 million Ghanaians into the public sector. With an increase of that, it will be a problem.
Government can decide not to recruit and see if public sector will survive. Because of that, you are giving the people who are the oil of the wheel of governance a pittance of 4%, and you are taking home 70+%.
So what do you expect?
Upon you, your fat salaries, once it takes away your fuel, it takes away petrol, it takes away water, it takes away electricity. We buy all of this. Look at the cost of inflation. Look at inflation rate today. Look at how the cost of living has gone up. Look at the way standard of living has been so low. Look, a lot of public sector men are suffering broken homes. You know why? They are unable to run their home efficiently because there's no money. The money that we take home does not make us survive. And those who are living fat, whose bellies are bought, who live good, who travel anywhere, whose children are schooling abroad, want 70% plus. If they knew that 70% plus was good for the political elites, why didn't they do the same for those of us who buy electricity, who buy water, who bought trotro, who do this, who suffer? Why didn't they do this?
So what are you expecting? 10%, 15%?
Professor Intiamwa is saying that the percentage increment that you want to give to the parliamentarians,
right,
give same to the public sector. They have turned a deaf ear to them. And we are saying that they should go and throw that 4% into the Marines. We will not take it.
What if nothing happens about this demonstration? Government fails to hit your calls.
Why? Are we not in this country?
Right.
Are we not in this country? We have even been able to withstand, how do you call it, military dictatorships. How much more democracy? We know what to do. Let's get to the bridge. We'll cross it.
So which institution are you representing?
I am saying that I work for Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. I'm a public sector worker. And I'm a...
Why are you joining this demonstration?
We are doing this demonstration to show our displeasure in the 4% salary increment given to workers. And that is one thing.
But then, it's interesting. Where are you coming from, Adre? Which institution are you representing?
I'm coming from Dodowa.
Dodo?
In the South.
So what do you do as a public sector worker? You're a teacher?
Yes.
I see. But is school on vacation?
School is not on vacation.
So why are you joining this demonstration? You are doing this at the peril of the students. How do you respond to that?
How do the students learn if the teacher is not happy? Have you forgotten it's the teacher who teaches the student? Or the student teaches themselves? Answer that question. When the teacher is hungry, do you expect the teacher to teach? How would the teacher teach when he's hungry?
So for you, with this demonstration, if nothing is done about it, what then do you do?
We lay down our tools.
If nothing is done, we sit in the house until something is done. In fact, I'm ready to be sacked. I don't care.
You're ready to be sacked?
Yes, I don't care. You can look at my face.
You work with Ghana Education Service.
I don't care.
That's where you earn your daily bread.
Daily bread?
Right.
Did you say daily bread?
But you're a teacher. That's where you earn your keep.
The bread is not up to a day.
Oh, the bread is not up to a day?
It's not up to a day.
So the bread is up to which hour?
Not even a day. You can even call it quarter. You can take a look at the whole salary. If not because of on the street, I would have shown you my pay slip, my rank, my salary I take, and I'll tell you the conditions. That is the rent and the utility I pay at home. A family of 4. And you're expecting me to live with that, and you are giving me 4%. What is wrong?
So what's your expectation for the percentage?
In fact, what is good for the goose is good for the ganders. If Article 71 office holders are taking 53%, then in fact, workers must also be paid the 53%.
Well, so that's what happened today in Accra, and you had one of them say, well, when you talk about daily bread, what he's paid does not amount to his daily bread. In fact, he would refer to it as quarter bread. Well, he had some also make the point that they think the TUC has let them down. They say the TUC, they pay 2% of their salaries to the Trades Union Congress. They are happy, and they're asking them to take 4%. They would not accept it. The TUC should understand that they are working for the public sector workers, and they're supposed to serve their interests. This evening, we're joined by the Director of Research and Policy of the Trades Union Congress, Dr. Kwabena Nyaku-Otu. Dr. Otu, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. He joins us via Zoom.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Great. So you've heard from some of these workers, and they accuse you of letting them down because you could not negotiate in their interest. Why did you agree to a 4% when your workers say they want more?
Okay, thank you. I think the person you just interviewed is right. Pay levels in Ghana are very low, and we have known this for a very long time. Pay levels in Ghana are also not equitable. We've known this also for a very long time. There's a large number of inequities in our pay levels. So we know, for instance, that public sector workers in the sub-region, say Togo, Burkina Faso, they earn much higher than public sector workers in Ghana. But there's a reason for some of these things. But we also continue to advocate that government and the social partners do everything in their power to bring up wages in Ghana to a level commensurate.
Hello, Doc. I think we have a bit of challenge with Dr. Otu's connectivity. We'll try to rectify that so we're able to get Dr. Otu telling us more about. We want to understand what actually went into accepting the 4% because, yes, we know that we're in COVID times, but okay, so Dr. Otu has joined us again. Yes, Dr. Otu, you're making a point about, what you expect from government, what government has to do to get public sector wages up to those within the sub-region.
Okay, so I also agree that the 4% is very low. And the Secretary General of the TUC has repeatedly said that we ourselves, we are not happy with it. But take it from this angle. You are negotiating with an employer called the Government of Ghana, who has done a budget with a 0% salary increase, and who, to some extent, has more or less agreed with a section of the public sector union for a 0% increase in salaries for 2021.
And which section of the public union are you talking about? Which section of the public?
the section called the Forum.
Okay.
It's a grouping of some of the largest public sector unions. Even before the budget was read, has more or less agreed with them. There was an understanding, an MOU to that effect. That says that given the COVID situation and given the fiscal position of government, for this year, there was not going to be any salary increase. So this is the position from which we came from. And we also then proceeded to see government figures, not just government figures, Bank of Ghana figures about the economy. That paints a very bleak future picture of the economic situation at hand. And it was clear to us that this economy is hot for both workers, but also hot for government. And we thought that if for nothing, a 4% or any increase in salaries would have been good for workers. The other alternative would have been to go for a COLA, a cost of living allowance, which is what we did in 2014. But our analysis told us that any increase is better than simply a COLA. And we did accept, not because we are happy with it, but we did accept knowing that this is the situation in which the economy of Ghana finds itself.
Let's look at your analysis. I'm interested in your analysis. Now, why did your analysis say, based on what did you come to the conclusion that any level of increase would be okay?
Okay, so that analysis is just opposed with what we did in 2014. Okay. Where we got a cost of living allowance. And that cost of living allowance meant that there was a 0% salary increase in 2014. Now, when we came to 2015, an announcement of 13% salary increase was made. But that 13%, at the moment you take off the 10% cost of living allowance agreed in 2014, effectively comes to 3%. Okay. But the most serious aspect of it was that the 10% cost of living allowance, which we got in 2014, meant that it did not affect our social security contribution. For those that have provident fund, it did not affect them. But social security is important for workers going forward as you prepare towards your future. So we thought that if you got any increase for this year, it's an opportunity to build on it for the preceding year, the next year, and the years ahead of you. And it also reflects in your social security contribution. Those who provident fund, it also reflects. That is the basis on which I make that point.
Now, I mean, we're talking about COVID-19, and in COVID-19 also, we do know that a lot of workers have become worse off. Okay, and so if these persons have become worse off, we should be thinking of giving them more to cater for their needs, isn't it?
Exactly. If government has the resources, if the employer has the resources to provide, why not? You try to do everything you can to ameliorate suffering. But I'm telling you that this is your employer who has made a budget and says that because of the finances, I cannot. So if people have become worse off because of COVID, and if it were possible for government, then why not? But we were shown figures that showed that it was not possible for government.
But talking about not being possible for government, now these workers raise concerns, and they've raised concerns about, for instance, Article 71 office holders. They've raised concerns about those within, public service, political appointees who earn so much. Okay, even in COVID, we have seen increases from 2017 to 2020, backdated and having to be paid. So if we have done that for Article 71 office holders, why can't we do that for, public sector workers? Or if we felt that, public sector workers, we felt that their condition was so, they're very, very important, couldn't we have waited on the Article 71 office holders and said, well, let's take care of public sector workers. When the economy gets better, then we can take care of the Article 71 office holders too.
I've already admitted to the fact that we have a remuneration system in Ghana that is hugely unfair and skewed towards the few. So single spine as a whole, for instance, had a major focus on reducing inequities in the public sector pay system. And if you talk about the unfairness and just suppose, say, Article 71 with those on the single spine, you see that unfairness clearly. But going forward, it's also important that we do the comparison rightly. In 2017, there was a salary increase for public sector workers, 12.5%. In 2018, there was 10%. In 2019, there was 11%. In 2020, there was 12% for public sector workers. A cumulative increase of about 45%. Now, if you check Article 71, in 2017, they are getting 10%. 2018, they are getting 10%. 2019, they are getting 10%. And 2020, they are getting 10%. So the increases are comparable for the two groups. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So for 2017, 2020, you have a situation where both enjoyed a certain level of increase. Okay. The percentages are comparable, but I also admit that the absolute figures are not comparable.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, going forward in 2021, public sector has 4%. We do not know yet what Article 71 office holders will have. What we know is that the president has given a commitment that he and his ministers will take a 0% salary increase for 2021.
Okay. Yes, but now your workers who hit the streets today, or your members who hit the street today, have complained. You have said that's something you need to look at. We'll get back to some of the concerns, but talking about looking at this particular issue, you've been negotiating with government. What does government tell you it will do in dealing with the disparities in wages in this country?
I mean, as of now, in 2018, government actually set up a committee through the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations to look at the entire public sector remuneration system with a specific focus on the single spine. That report was submitted. Nothing has been done. But you also know that there has been a lot of lip service paid to this inequities thing. The whole single spine project was to deal with this inequity thing. We have failed catastrophically to do that. So the inequities persist and they are actually getting worse. Salaries remain low for those that are on the single spine, while it's abundantly clear that it is higher for those that are outside of the single spine. Now, the Secretary General of the TUC in the last press conference mooted the idea of having a presidential commission to look holistically at the remuneration system in the public sector, which is what we are hoping that the president and the government will take it up, because it is not sustainable going forward. The teachers are comparing themselves with their colleague teachers who suddenly became an MP and whose pay is substantially now higher, plus the other perks they get from the public service. I mean, if you take even the Article 71 out, you still have a large number of public sector workers that even earn much higher than the president himself, and Article 71 as a group. Mm-hmm. These are important issues that need to be addressed. And we think that a presidential commission that takes a holistic view of the entire public sector remuneration system would do. Of course, I mean, in the last 63 years of our independence or so, we have had several such commissions that have failed to address the challenge of pay inequities in the public sector. We can only hope that a new commission will do a better job and the politicians will have the political will to implement the decisions of that commission.
Now, we'll get to the single spine shortly, but you've talked about a report that was, a committee that was commissioned. They submitted their reports. Do you by chance know the contents of that report? What did it say?
I do, but I'm not permitted to talk about it.
What did it say? I mean, it should have said a few things about salary and how to go about it. I mean, the areas that you could talk about.
It addresses the questions of low pay. It addresses the question of pay inequities in the public sector. But it also addresses the issues of productivity and work output by public sector.
How does it address low pay and productivity?
I really don't want to go into the details of that report because...
No, briefly. I mean, we're not going to go into the details of it. We just want to you to tell us briefly how it addresses, low wages and productivity.
I mean, you are really pushing me to review what the report contains, but I'm not prepared to do that. It's been submitted, and the ministers will have to unveil it and actually address it. The issues in there, yeah.
I know, but talking about productivity, I know you've been negotiating with government, and you have said, for instance, that this year there will be no redundancy, and as part of the reasons you give to your members that, if we're to look for higher increases in salary, there's a possibility of some of you being laid off. Are we looking at a situation where, you actually tie increase in salaries to performance?
I mean, that's what it ought to be, that increases are productivity-based.
Okay.
The single spine itself has an element of that sort. Unfortunately, we have not been able to implement it also because we still do not have a scientific measurement of people's output in the public sector. So it's difficult. Of course, employers, both private and government, brings up the issue of productivity at the point of negotiations. But once negotiations are done, they do very little to try to address the questions that affect productivity. So you hear people say workers are not productive, but really they do not go further to investigate why people are not productive. Do they really have the materials, the tools? And we know that even within our budgetary system, people are paid, but they are not given the resources with which they are able to, they are supposed to be working. Instances where in this country, teachers will have to use their own money to buy chalk and other teaching materials. Yeah.
So these are
all... again, we keep paying lip service to the questions of productivity. It only becomes important for employers at the point of negotiation.
And these are some of the concerns that will be dealt with if we were to implement the reports.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Great. Now, you talk about single spine failing. You've talked about how single spine was to address some of the challenges associated with the salary structure. That has not happened. So how do we deal with that? Should we make sure that we take a second look at single spine, correct the challenges that we have, or we probably come up with another pay structure?
I mean, sure, we need to take a second look at the single spine. You see, before single spine came into being, there were a number of negotiating centers, multiples of bargaining centers within the public sector, over 100. So those in GBC will be negotiating, and those in Kolebu will also be negotiating, unrelated to each other. And that's part of the reasons why we have the salary inequities we have in the public sector. Single spine had the idea that let's bring all of them onto a superstructure, a single structure, a vertical structure, so that we know exactly who is taking what and we can properly align and reduce the inequities. Unfortunately, within the public sector, there are different laws for different organizations on how to determine their salaries. So even for those that have been brought onto the single spine, the moment they realize that the pay there is not good, they invoke their own laws and tell you that fair wages can no longer determine our salaries. After all, our law, or even some go to the extent of the Constitution, the Constitution mandates our board or some other entity to determine our pay. So if you take, for instance, what UTAG is asking for, they are essentially asking to leave the single span.
Okay.
Because if they are asking for a basic pay of 2,000, if you have a professor on a particular level or a particular a level within the single span, that lecturer is not there alone. He is there with a non-lecturer. If you ask for $2,000 equivalent in cedis, you are then actually asking for some other people who are non-lecturers as well. So the only way government can grant that is to say that I have taken you off the single span and you can now have your own salary structure. So there's a general clamor for groups to leave the single span, principally because it offers inferior pay, and also some of the groups actually have laws that allow them to exit the single span.
I mean, we'll come back shortly.
There's definitely a need to take a second look at the single span.
We'll come back
it
to
has
how
not fulfilled the promise.
We'll come back to how we should look at the single spine, but you've also raised an important question about UTAG. My guest this evening is Dr. Kwabena Nyakotu, who's Director of Labor Research and Policy Institute at the Trades Union Congress. We're trying to understand whether TUC let public sector workers down. And once you've raised the issue of UTAG, because today government is negotiating with them, and they said, well, we see your concerns and all of that. When we return after these few messages, we get into that particular issue and ask the question again, whether you, as TUC, couldn't have gone the same way. This is Upfront on the JoyNews channel. I'm Winston Amoa. We'll be right back. Right, so welcome back and thank you very much for staying with us here on Upfront on the JoyNews channel. I'm Winston Amoa. This evening we're talking about public sector wages, and you've seen some of them embark on a demonstration, and they're demonstrating against the Trades Union Congress, and we're asking the question whether the Trades Union Congress let the workers down. And this evening we're joined by Dr. Kwabena Nyakotu, who's Director of Labor Research and Policy Institute of Trades Union Congress. So yes, Dr. Otu, let's get to one point. You've talked about UTAG, and we've seen UTAG, and we've seen the actions they've taken. Now, just today, we've seen the MOU signed between the Education Ministry and UTAG. And one thing is instructive. Now, the Education Ministry says, we're going to deal with all the concerns that you have raised. And UTAG has talked about, like you stated, I mean, entry-level salaries. They think that should be given about $2,000. They think that they're not being paid well. And haven't pressed home their demands, we've seen the ministry saying, we're going to deal with them. Let's sign and go back to the classroom. You have said, that is more like saying we want to get out of the single spine. But that's also a group knowing what they have to offer and using that to demand what is due them. Doesn't that tell you that you could have done more?
You could. There's always a lot we could do. But Winston, remember, UTAG is a very homogeneous group. The animal you call organized labor, it's non-homogeneous. There are different interests within. It's not just TUC. TUC has 21 affiliates. But there are a large number of workers' groups that are not affiliated to TUC and who all are part of organized labor. There are different interest groups. There are different groups with different bargaining powers and opportunities. So it's difficult to think that it's simple for organized labor to do exactly what the UTAG has just done. Okay, you should recognize the differences within organized labor. It is not as homogeneous as UTAG or any other single union entity.
But of course, I mean, you're tasked to negotiate on behalf. You went into negotiations on behalf of these public sector workers. They're telling you now that we're not happy with what you did for us. So clearly that should be giving you the power to go back and say, we want to renegotiate, shouldn't it?
I mean, you see, negotiation is a very serious business, very formal business that it it actually behoves on the parties to negotiate in good faith and to do everything to reach an agreement. Winston, just take it from the other side. In 2020, when COVID hit, and most public sector workers were sitting at home, we had negotiated in 2019 that 2020 pay should go up by 12%. And then COVID hit. Just think of the Ghana government telling us that because of COVID, please come back and let's renegotiate 2020 salary increase we agreed in 2019. What would we have done?
What would you have done?
What would we have done? Knowing that COVID was so intense in 2020, revenues were not coming, the ports have been shut, the borders have been shut, the airport has been shut. On top of that, Accra, Kumasi have been shut. Government would have had some grounds and say, I don't have the revenue. Please come and let's renegotiate. But somehow government kept its side of the bargain. Now, when you go into a formal negotiation backed by law and you are done, it is not that simple to simply say, please, my members are not happy, so come and renegotiate. It is not as simple as that.
Now that your members are saying, we don't like this, now that your members are saying you should have done better, would you admit that maybe you could have done better and this is more like you failing to meet the needs of your members?
I mean, we on our part have actually considered that we were not happy with the 4%. Okay. But given what we know, given what we saw, given the circumstances, we didn't fail our members. And what we should be doing, and the Secretary General mentioned that, is to continue to engage our members, explain to them the rationale, the reasons why we did what we did.
Okay. But the Secretary General also admits that, well, as part of negotiations, you have said, oh, there should be no redundancy in 2021. And you're also looking forward to, more jobs, 1 million jobs in 3 years. And as part of that, you should also be mindful of the wage levels and hence a decision to accept 4% increase, isn't it?
The Secretary General didn't say be mindful of the wage level. I mean, those add-ons, these are things government must do anyway. And you have a government that comes, your employer that comes to tell you, yes, I must pay your wages, I must increase your wages. But government also has a responsibility to do other things, like government has a responsibility to vaccinate the population against COVID. Okay. It makes sense to the leadership of the organized labor that we are not saying that once you pay the wages, increase our wages, and then government is demobilized. Government doesn't do anything again. We know government has other responsibilities. So these are add-ons that government must continue to function. It must continue to vaccinate the population. Government must continue to function the way government functions. They were not really the principal reasons why, or a kind of a condition, the increases were conditioned on those things. But government then, after everything, tells you that I am going to do all of these things to keep the country together, to keep the economy going.
And that's why you accepted it. We've just about 5 minutes to go. So let's look at dealing with a single spine, because you've talked about how UTAG, by their actions, would want to leave the single spine. But how do we make sure that the single spine works and works well for all workers on the spine?
I think the thing going forward about the single spine, it's not just to look at the single spine as a single salary structure. It is to take a holistic view of remuneration in the public sector. Okay. One thing that defines the Ghanaian remuneration system is that we have large numbers in the public sector compared to, say, Togo or Burkina Faso. That's why the Togolese and the Burkina-based are able to pay their people well. Okay. But in addition to the large numbers, we also have huge pay inequities. Okay. And in fact, single spine, one of its objectives is to reduce the inequities, free resources to be able to pay, increase wages for the majority of the population. This hasn't happened. So we need to take a look at the single spine, but we also need to find a way of linking it to the other structures within the public sector. Okay. Because you see, the teachers will take their pay and compare that pay with those that are non-teachers, but that are also subsisting on the public purse. So it is important that you do that linkage and try to reduce the inequities. I mean, in salary matters, it's also an emotional issue. And that for those receiving low pay, it becomes very difficult for them to accept that others are receiving so fantastic levels of pay. It is important that we reduce the levels of inequity. So we need to take a harder look at the single spine, but not in isolation. It should be in conjunction with taking a look at the other bargaining centers or structures within the public sector.
But this is what it should have done. It hasn't done now.
It hasn't.
Yes,
it hasn't.
Good. If you're looking at it and if you're supposed to compare and someone says, your salary is higher, we're supposed to be at the same level, that in effect is saying, we need to move that person to a higher level. There are complaints about, our wage bill. So if you look at this, and you've also talked about how we are not in normal times, and so you've looked at government revenue and expenditure, and I've said, well, we can pardon government and we can accept a few things. If you look at that, the suggestion you're making, how feasible is it?
It is feasible, but I agree with you, the timing question. You understand? In fact, I mean, when government set up that committee I spoke earlier about, that was the time we should have taken a harder look at the public sector salary. We are now in a time period which makes it difficult to holistically address those issues. But we can begin a process. And that process must take a hard look, technically at the structures and all the things that are not right about the existing structures within the public sector and what we can do going forward to correct it. I agree 100% with you. The timing is a bit difficult, but a process must be put forward, must commence.
Great. So as we wait for the process to commence, now your members are listening, are watching you now, and they're saying, what do you have for us? As far as we're concerned, we deserve better salaries. What do you tell them finally?
I agree with them 100% that they deserve better salaries. But they should bear with us. We did not fail them. We have their interests at heart. And we will continue to press on government to do the needful going forward, to address the huge disparities and to significantly enhance emolument within the public sector for everybody, not for a few.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwabena Nyakotu, for joining us this evening on Upfront on the Joy News channel. Dr. Kwabena Nyakotu is the Director of Labour Research and Policy Institute at the Trades Union Congress. That's all from us this evening. My name is Winston. I'm on behalf of the team. Thank you so much for being part of us. Catch you tomorrow on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. Have a lovely evening and keep watching the Joy News channel.